Okay. I mean, it's just 1:02. I think we can get started. I see some familiar faces from last time. So raise your hand if you didn't join the first session, but you're joining us now. I know Tom is new, Shauna, Barb. Okay.
And, and I'm
Oh,
new.
oh yes, Chris, you're new. And here's Christine Curry. She's coming in. She'll be new also. Let's just give it 1 second for her to connect to the audio.
Hey, Tom, it's nice to see the tops of your fingertips. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Christine is joining. Okay, we're just going to get started. I'm recording. Most of you know me. My name is Christina Dexter. I'm the communications director for IFU, but I'm also a trained facilitator in something called the Gateless Writing Method, which is what we're going to use here today to just kind of guide us through our time. Since we have some folks here from last time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our rules, on how we kind of create the gateless container, just a little bit, because I just want us to get to writing and reading. And I think folks new to our group will kind of learn as we go. I'll briefly share the rules as we get into it, but I want to have as much good time for writing as possible. So here's a rundown of what our hour is going to look like. We're going to get started. We're going to take a few minutes to just kind of settle into our bodies, to focus on the breath. I know that sounds fluffy, but we're going to do it anyway. Hold on, let me admit a couple folks. Okay. There we go.
Christina, even real men meditate.
Everyone should meditate. We'd all be happier, I think, if we do it. So we're going to focus on the breath, and then I'm going to give you all a prompt. I mean, just like we did last time, and you're going to follow the first thing that comes up, the first thing that rises when you get that prompt. Okay, so you're going to grab on to the little fish's tail that swims into your mind, and you're going to go where it goes, not necessarily where you want it to go. You're just going to kind of follow the idea, explore it without judging it or like forcing it to be something, right? We'll write for about 15 minutes. And my advice to you, if you get hung up, is just don't stop writing. Drop down into the senses. If it's a memory, how did it taste? Were you smelling something at the time? And then we'll come back after that, and we'll invite some folks to share. Christine, I see you're raising your hand.
Yes, are we supposed to type or literally write with the pen and paper?
You can, you know what, you can do anything you want. I think whatever your preference is.
Okay.
I just said this earlier, if you have trouble reading your own writing, maybe you type. I like to type, but it's whatever,
Okay.
feels good. Some people
Thanks.
really like to handwrite. Yeah. Okay, so we've got our group here. I know people are joining kind of as I was speaking, but let's just go with it and we'll get started. So if you feel comfortable enough right now, I just want you to kind of close your eyes. Let your eyelids close. And you can keep your screen on or off while we do this and while we meditate. When we're done writing, maybe you come back on screen because it's fun to see you, but whatever is the most comfortable. So let's float our eyelids closed. Wherever you are, try to let your feet fall to the floor. You may need to lower your chair a little. Stretch your legs out. So this is just really an effort to ground the body, because we know powerful writing, it comes from the body. Emotions live in our bodies, literally in our blood. Stories live inside of us, and the page is kind of the vehicle, the conduit to take them out of the body and to put them somewhere. So I want you to draw just like a warm, deep breath, slowly, just like very methodically, in through your nostrils and just down your throat to the very bottom of your belly. Kind of notice that path, the path the breath takes and how it all feels. The warmth or coolness around your nostrils. Maybe your nose is dripping, so it's cold when you take a breath in. the passageway of your throat, the stretch, the expansion of the breath in your belly, and then how it collapses when you let it out. So let's just take a couple more of those big breaths. Sometimes it's comforting to take your breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. You know, that's a nice way of getting settled. So on your next breath, I want you to take it in and I want you to send it to any spots of tension in the body, like it's something warm. So maybe you send it to your busy mind. It's the middle of the day. I know we get very hung up in the busyness of midday, maybe to the tightness of your shoulders, an achy lower back. I want you to release the tension on the, on the breath out. So you're breathing in, and when you breathe out, let the tension go. And then maybe we also just take a second to get a little more comfortable in our seat. Square your hip bones. Maybe you do one of these kind of rotating circles, stretches the lower back a little. Where you let your head fall from side to side. You can kind of do what the body wants you to do, wherever there's a little something that isn't right. So lately I've been thinking about what it means to change direction. I think spring brings that to mind, right? The newness of it. The wind does it, winter winds from the north, summer winds from the south. Animals migrate, right? Because they know to. They change direction. Again, it's in their blood, it's in their bodies. But when? How do we know when? So I want you to think about a time you changed direction. Perhaps think about the why of it. Maybe the road was closed and you took a different way. Maybe you realized the thing you were doing didn't work anymore, that you needed a new approach. Maybe you changed direction against popular advice and it was very frightening. Maybe it paid off, maybe it didn't. So I want you to write about a time you changed direction. You have 15 minutes. You can start writing now, and then we'll come back together after this. So for everyone that's just coming in, so we're going to take about 15 minutes to write. Our prompt is write about a time you changed direction. So go ahead and start writing and try not to stop for the next 15 minutes. If you feel like you're hung up, just go ahead and drop into the senses, maybe of the memory, how it tastes, smelt, that kind of thing. So 15 minutes, write about a time you changed direction. We've got about 5 minutes left, so keep it up. Doing good. Let's take about another 90 seconds. 90 seconds to kind of land things or push out that last bit of writing. Okay, just come back to us when you can. I hope that went well for everyone. Okay, see your little screens popping on. So as you all come back, I'm just going to share my screen and we're going to kind of go over the rules here for our reading and feedback part of all of this. Okay, I hope you guys are seeing what I am seeing. So I'm going to kind of invite you all to, if you have the fire in your belly to read, to maybe raise your hand, message me in the chat, and we would invite you all to read today. So some guidelines for reading, listening, and feedback. So this is how it's going to kind of all go. So if you are reading, no explaining or disclaiming before reading. We don't need to hear that it's crap. Right? We, the listeners, are going to form our own opinion of it. So you're just going to jump into reading. The first word to come from you is going to be the first word on the page. So for listening, kind of the most important aspect of all of this is we find what works, we find what we love, we find where the power is, and we get very specific about it. So this is where craft comes in. As a listener, if we can identify craft in other people's work, in these new works, then we will kind of melt that craft into our own writing and we will become better writers because of that. So no suggestions on what could make the work better. Remember, we're just looking for power, for impact. Maybe there was a shift in the work somewhere that we loved, a repetition that we loved, but no suggestions, no criticism, no, even if you think like, oh, this would make a great, play, this would make a great op-ed. We don't know kind of where the intentions of the writer is in this work. So even though we may mean it in a positive way, that can be kind of deflating. We stay on the page. So no self-reflective comments, no my dog died too situations. We just stay on the page. So most importantly here, we treat everything as non-intimate work. So you're going to hear us say the narrator instead of you. We can say the narrator, we can even say the reader, but we're not going to say you because we believe all works to be shared here today is works of fiction. This is not necessarily the reader's true experience. And so we are going to acknowledge that in the work by saying the narrator, the reader, and then no questions about the work. So after it's read, we're just going to be, our reader is going to listen and we are not going to address them specifically or, ask them questions about the work. I'm going to stop sharing. Who wants to read today? Is anyone feeling like, oh, Deborah wants to read? Okay, who after Deborah? Or I'll just go kind of as we, okay. Deborah, you start and then,
Okay.
and so just a reminder as Deborah reads, so I will be taking notes. So I think that's a really helpful way in guiding our comments. So if you wanna write down some very specific like language that you loved, that's a good way to keep things straight. So Deborah, you can get us started.
Okay. Things had always been difficult at home. My folks, who were both young parents when they started their life together, seemed to be from an even earlier generation where my way or the highway was the law good families lived by. I remember December 8th, 1980, as though it were yesterday, lying in bed with the radio quietly playing on a local station. Breaking news suddenly burst in with news that John Lennon had been shot outside the infamous Dakota apartment building where he lived. I was shocked. A little later than most, I had only recently discovered the Beatles. I lived in a no rock music house that was dominated by the likes of Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline. I would I would come to appreciate these artists years later. John Lennon was being taken to the hospital. His injuries were apparently serious, but no other information was available. The radio DJ said Yoko was present when the shooting occurred. Something about a deranged fan, no further details available. Yoko was with John, thankfully, I thought. She'll be there when he recovers. Trying unsuccessfully to stay awake to learn more, I awoke the next morning. Was it a dream? Strange. I ran to the front room and flicked on the TV. Canada AM was on, and they were talking about John Lennon. He was dead. I began to sob uncontrollably. In utter disbelief, I sat transfixed, needing details. I'm sorry, I can have a hard time understanding my own writing because I was trying to write fast. As tears ran down my face, my father entered the room. I don't know why they're making such a fuss over a fucking hippie, he said. How could he be so dismissive? John Lennon was important to me. Did he know that? Could anyone in our house have anything that didn't emanate from my father? And then I stopped. The end of the story is me deciding in that moment to leave home forever.
Deborah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Okay. So you all drop, yes, please use the chat to amplify, to note things that we love, while we hear it. So I'll just start and then I'll kind of ask you all to jump in. So we get a little frame with some tension. Things had always been difficult at home. Both of my parents were young when they started their life together. I love how we enter into this really specific December 8th, 1980. So, and then we go into the breaking news, John Lennon has been shot. So we would kind of call that a global frame, right? By the narrator is describing time and place, kind of important cultural events that are happening, and from there we can kind of deduce, right, what has happened, the larger landscape, what maybe this narrator is experiencing in the broader life, that kind of thing. I had only recently discovered the Beatles, so we can kind of think, oh, this narrator is in a transformational period of their life, maybe youth, that kind of thing. And then we have a major, energy shift kind of as these things are revealed. The father, the dialogue, why are they making such a fuss about a fucking hippie? So our narrator is kind of establishing the importance, and then the father in this piece is really kind of comes in towards the end and almost just like flattens it, right? Tears ran down my face. Who wants to kind of jump in with what they loved here? I'm looking in the chat. So you all just come off mute and just kind of share what you loved or where you thought there was some power in the piece. A no rock house, says Pat in the chat.
I also thought the line about the fucking hippie was really, really powerful and really effective, and showed someone who was not around at the time. I just thought everyone was and would be really sad about that there was some social tension regarding this man, this movement, this music. I don't know. I thought but also weaved right into your story. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. So into the narrator's story, right? And then let's stay on but so what Derek is trying to say, it takes a reader into the moment and what you may interpret as a sad moment, but our narrator through this language is kind of showing a really, interesting kind of aggressive side to it. Who else wants to make a comment here?
I have one. I really enjoy stories about historic moments that we've shared that are made as personal as this one was. Because of course, you know, we have the reaction of what our experience was, but I think that's a really powerful tool in writing the way that she kind of talked about the radio station, because of course that makes us think like, what was the radio station I was hearing, or how did I hear? Or I just thought it's just a powerful tool to talk about those kinds of things, and the way she did it, I thought really was effective at making me think.
Yeah, the narrator instilled some, some very kind of deeply piercing. How about Giselle? Do you want to make a comment? I see in the chat what you've said.
Yeah, well, I typed it, but yeah, I thought the narrator did a really good job of recalling back into the emotions of the child or the youth or younger person, and showing that and the sort of thought process of, was it a dream? I'm glad Yoko was with him and will be when he wakes up. The crying, it was a really nice progression of like really what you can feel a vulnerable and younger person feeling.
Yeah, there is some youthful like innocence almost to the language, like he will wake up. So yeah, Giselle, you're completely spot on. Okay. Thank you, Deborah, for reading. Oh, and I see Mary Ellen says no further details available. Yeah, things not talked about. Thank you, Deborah. Who wants to read next? I know someone does. Tom, I just saw a little flash of your hand.
A little over a decade ago, my brother, whom I farmed with my entire life, announced he was making a choice to divorce his wife and leave the farm. This moment came like a lightning strike from the clear blue sky. Riding in his pickup while we're on our way to change irrigation water, a daily ritual in the summertime. It was our routine. As I reflected back on this moment, it was not his announcement to quit farming, but what was I going to do in the days, weeks, and months to come? His change was my change. The change for me turned out to be the direction I would go with my farm that I now had full responsibility. The changes were nearly countless. My relationships with people, especially landlords, and personal relationships that I now had to take to a slightly different direction, maybe. How would I get my farm smaller? How would my relationship change with my wife? And ultimately, though, it opened up many doors. It took me toward the reality that I was learning to let go of so many things. And that was my lesson, is to learn to let go of so many things.
Thank you for reading, Tom. There's so many wonderful questions in this piece. I love how we go a little over a decade ago. So we're immediately oriented in time, right? Which I think is a comforting tool to offer a narrator in going into the story. And then we kind of really get specifically into this, the announcement of the brother leaving, they're in the pickup to change the irrigation water, a daily ritual. So we see right in this story that things aren't the same. Big things are changing. Things are shifting. Questions are coming into play. Okay, before I keep going on, who wants to share what they loved about this piece?
Well, I really enjoyed the setting, the description, and then the letting go of so many things. Because I don't always think of a change in terms, because when you let go of something, you really don't just let go or you change directions. It's a cascading kind of thing. It's all kinds of things. And I thought that told, and I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, it's self-evident, but you pointed that any change isn't a change in just one thing. It's all of these other things. And so I was trying to imagine all of the different things that were changing in the narrator's story that weren't mentioned. So my mind went into other directions. I don't know if it was the intention or not, but I thought it was powerful.
Yeah, these questions that the narrator offers us kind of, you know, allows our mind to keep expanding with more questions. How would I get my farm smaller? How would my relationship with my wife be impacted? That kind of thing. So the piece is, right, it's built upon questions of the future. Who wants to offer something else they loved?
Well, the questioning the future, all the thoughts that ran through his mind also, to me, would be like you'd be like real panicky. Your feeling would be really panicky. Well, how am I going to do all that by myself? And so that way of describing it was really effective, I think, when he talked about all the thoughts that ran through his mind when his brother said that.
Yeah, this narrator does like ground us, right? You're completely right. We don't feel panicky. We're just kind of following along into the questions in the future. So one line I really loved, it was not his announcement. His change was my change. I thought that felt very poetic. Okay, one more thing that we loved about this piece.
I loved it. I love that too. His change was my change, because I think Robert Leonard mentioned it as well. When change happens to someone near you, sometimes it cascades into your change as well, even though you don't want it to be. But I also liked when he described it like lightning from a clear blue sky. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, it was a beautiful image, wasn't it? Yeah, I see another. I liked how clear it was, how the personal impacts the farm / business, which then impacts the personal again, how intertwined and powerful these aspects of life are. Thank you, Tom, for reading. Who wants to read next? We've got about 15 minutes here. I think we should at least to one, maybe two more people. Yeah,
I don't mind reading.
all right. Awesome.
Okay. Okay. In 2004, about 10 years into my career as a grant writer, my personal life took a turn for the worse, I thought, when a long-time relationship ended. Our Santa Cruz communities were still smotheringly intertwined, and I was having a hard time imagining a future. Everything around me was tied to a dead thing. Friends in Oregon knew I was struggling. Though none of us had ever had any money, my friend Beverly won $1,000 on the radio one day, and she said she knew immediately what it meant to bring me to Oregon and spend a week at Brighton Bush Hot Springs with her and her husband, Eddie. We'd be taking a class there about communicating with nature. So I went, and we sat in sulfury hot springs and ate fried tofu communally with other students. Most of us hiked during our time out of class. In class, we tuned in and got quiet and talked about what nature might have to say. Steps towards hearing the whisper of truth in the soil and the trees and the rocks. Rocks, it turned out, were my specialty. I could talk for a long time to rocks. They told me I needed to move to a new city and fill my brain with new opportunities. I tried to move to San Francisco, but it was too expensive. So I asked my employer if they'd still pay me if I moved to Portland. It was 2004 and Portland wasn't as expensive then. Plus Beverly and Eddie were in Portland, so I already had a community starter kit. My boss said sure, and off I went. When I got to Portland, I worked remotely, so I had to go out of my way to meet people. I started with eHarmony, but quickly realized that their magical 29 points of compatibility would work better if I took their 50-page quiz when I wasn't clinically depressed. I lived on the Willamette River. Every week, women gathered to competitively dragon boat. It's synchronized rowing in beautiful longboats. I'm not good at it, but the women were great, which is just what I needed to fix my 29 points of compatibility. After a year in Portland, and specifically a very long rainy winter in Portland, I had enough professional experience to find a job in San Francisco. I applied to the Sierra Club. Instead of grant writing, I led a grant writing team, which paid better. And I interacted with program staff across the country. And that, kids, is How I Met My Husband. It's the end.
Thank you for reading, Shauna. In 2004, about 10 years into my career as a grant writer. So we're oriented again. So what really stood out to me in this piece is like, there's some really wonderfully placed like dry humor. Rocks were my specialty, you know, talking to the rocks. You know, the 29 points of compatibility, take the quiz while I wasn't clinically depressed. You know, so we're kind of disarming our listener with kind of this, you know, this interesting humor so we can take in like the bigger story, right? You know, this movement, you know, the friend, you know, who won the lottery, and I mean, it's, you know, so many beautiful details. Who wants to, okay, Christine says beautiful words, whisper of truth. Yeah. Who wants to jump in with what they thought was powerful?
Well, something that was powerful for all three to me was the vulnerability, because vulnerability sucks me in because we're all vulnerable. And then I identify with the vulnerability of the narrator, which brings me closer.
The vulnerability is very, you know, right? It's a universal, I think, way of bringing a listener in. I tried to move to San Francisco. It was 2004. Who else wants to jump in with what they loved here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme is pretty universal that the narrator used of heartbreak. And so that drew me in of, you know, remembering a place feeling too small or the future being something you can't see. There's a universal truth in that. And then I really liked because you can do a lot with depression, you know, but I did like the literary tool of just like the 29 points of compatibility, maybe not using that when you're clinically depressed as like it was a nice, I thought it was a nice show don't tell moment for talking about a hard moment, and also sort of like maybe a metaphor for like nothing feels compatible in those moments. Like there's no change of direction that feels right necessarily. So I liked that part as well.
Yeah, oh my God, this line, everything around me was tied to a dead thing. I mean, that like whew, flew off the page for me. Oh yeah, and I see that was just put in the chat. Who wants to make one more comment about what they loved about this piece?
I just wanted to say all the narrators did a fabulous job. I think, at least for me, I could relate to almost all of the emotions involved with the writings. And it was really very well, I thought they were all really well done.
Yeah, to be on the page, right? But they are, you know, we could say that, you know, way that stays on the page is, you know, right? We talked about the universality of, you know, all of these emotions, you know, that the narrator can reach out to us using very like common threads. Yeah. The soul and trees and rocks. Loved it. Thank you, Shauna. Okay, we have time for one more person. Who wants to be the last person to read today? Clara?
I would, sure. If that's okay. Okay. The years after college, I changed direction from the intense life of the mind and achievement and success towards the life of the body. Late nights drinking weak beer by dumpsters, the animated roar of restaurant kitchens, and the quiet thwump of weeds coming up by their root. My mind was tired. My body became the thinker. Westward, away from home, away from broken love, away from the gossiping of my parents' friends and the tutelage of my professors, away from small town farmer cafes with weak coffee, towards a city ringed by water, the smell of urine on the streets and roasting coffee beans and the funk of the ocean, towards a life not defined. Sleeping until late in the day, exploring new bus routes and trails, flirting with boys in bars, coming upon a whale carcass on a golden beach. Sleeping in a lighthouse on a forgotten cliff, all I felt was free. Then meeting the man with whom I would again change direction, back towards homeward, back to the light brown of small town coffee and the Midwest land, by turn green, golden, dull frozen brown, and glistening white. That's the end.
Oh my God, the repetition of the piece, right? I mean, that is what is so capturing because it's a repetition. All I felt was free. Yeah, and then we really do like, you know, there's this beautiful repetition, but we do come full scold. The years after college, I changed direction. Late nights, you know, drinking weak beer by the dumpsters, and there are some other great details in there that I didn't catch. My mind was tired, my body became the thinker. And then we go through that list of away from small town cafes. And then that embodied, you know, the urine on the streets. I mean, so many really like embodied details, flirting with boys in bars, a whale carcass on a forgotten beach. Yeah, with weak coffee, incredible detail, Bob says. Weak beers by dumpsters. Love that description. A life not defined.
Yeah,
I
that
like-
description, weak beer by dumpsters, was right near the beginning, and that got me right away. That was such a good description. I loved it.
And we know that's loaded, right? I mean, that, you know, lets the kind of the listener's mind, like, you know, go drinking weak beer by dumpsters, and we kind of imply, like, what is the situation? It's a great kind of, I think, jumping off point for a listener. Barb, I think you tried to...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one other instance, I thought the repetition was amazing. I was trying to capture all the repetition the narrator used, but towards a life not defined, towards homeward. So even the repetition of like bringing it back full circle, the weak beer, the weak coffee, like, and then the coffee tying into maybe the color of the landscape. It was very, I thought, very well written.
It was beautiful writing. Derek says light brown of Midwest coffee. Several instances by the narrator of using color. Yeah, Derek, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I pressed enter before I was finished, but I do another comment on there that I just thought the narrator using color, especially there at the end and kind of a flurry, I thought captured a lot of things really well, and I really love that. Yeah.
And I think we can love that because, right, we are getting a visual, you know, by kind of orienting us with color and smell, you know, the urine on the streets. We can really kind of go into like this narrator seeing their world. One more thing about what was so powerful about this piece. Bob says very sensual. Yeah, the language is very sensual, I think.
And remarkably polished for 15 minutes, I will say.
I think because the tools in it are so strong. I mean, the craft tools give us such what feels like a very like polished story. You know, and by us talking about it like this, we've found where all the craft is happening. You know, the repetition, the coming full circle. You know, these descriptions. Yeah.
The words,
you.
all I felt were free. All I felt was free. Just really resonated.
Yeah, that was a very like short and powerful sentence. So we see not everything has to be super long and, you know, wordy to make a punch. And, you know, it was just a short sentence that inflicted so much impact. And I think this was built of a lot of kind of short sentences and brief images. Well, thank you, Claire, for reading, and thanks everyone for joining. I don't know, while we're here together, if you have any questions or thoughts. My plan was to get us together every 2 weeks. And I think I may send out a little survey. We can figure out, is this clock time best for people? Would you prefer, maybe earlier in the day, noon, morning? So you guys can let me know. Do we have any thoughts or questions before we part ways here? No.
Thank you very much for holding this.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for joining. Oh, and I was going to say, be sure that you are keeping all of these pieces, right? Because kind of internally we have, within IFU, we've talked about how can we amplify them, right? So keep them. I wouldn't suggest that you edit them too much. If anything, you can just kind of go in and edit for like readability, maybe some grammar, but I would resist the urge to really just, cut, and destroy, right, until kind of maybe later in your process of collating them, because that can leave us with, leave the writer with very little to work with when you're kind of piecing things together. So resist the urge to destroy the beautiful things you've just created. Okay.
Is there any way we can help you get, do you need testimonials or help getting the word out, getting more people involved, or is this the right size group you like?
Yeah, well, I think we would love to get as many people involved as possible. So if you all want to share this, or if you have someone in mind to invite, we would appreciate that. I mean, if it gets too big, it's kind of hard because not as many people can read, but that's fine too. It offers good energy, I think, in the group when we have a lot of people listening and that kind of thing. So, okay. Thanks, everyone.
Also, Christina, can I just say one thing before we go?
Yes.
If you're not an IF member, please consider joining. I'm
Yes.
obligated to say that. Sorry.
It's important to say.
Yeah, very important. Please join us. We would love that. Okay, everyone, I'm going to end the meeting. Email me if you need anything. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.